This morning after the Memphis Police Department announced 2 additional police officers have been relieved of duty in the wake of the death of Tyre Nichols. The city's fire department also announced 3 personnel who responded to the scene have been fired. Joining us now, Republican Congressman Anthony D'Esposito of New York. Congressman D'Esposito is a former NYPD detective and a former fire department chief. Congressman, thanks so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it, and you bring your expertise to this conversation. You've called for some changes in the wake of the death of Tyre Nichols. I'm curious, the humanity of it hit all of us, the lack of humanity in that video. But as a police officer, as a firefighter, what did you see in that video?
Well, I'll start with this. There is nobody that dislikes a bad cop more than good cops. So let's focus there. But I think what we saw in this video is that we need to take a hard look at training across this nation and make it standardized so that departments, whether you're in Middle America, the East or West Coast, we have the same basic training. I think that's important to keep our community safe, and it's important to keep the members of service safe.
So, Congressman, I hear you on that, and I've heard many other people say that, but do you really need training to know not to beat a man within an inch of his life as he's laying on the ground? What training would have changed what we saw there?
Well, I think that there's what's happening right now is, unfortunately, many departments are lowering their standards, and it's because of the attack from the far left on law enforcement and the job that people do each and every day. We've seen it. I'll use my department of the NYPD as an example. I mean, this year alone, we've seen the record amount of exits. I think there's nothing more telling when you hear from members of law enforcement who have, for generations, been part of protecting and serving, and they are telling their children, their grandchildren, their nieces and nephews that they shouldn't join the police department because of the attack that we've seen from the far left. So I think that we need to embrace, we need to call for training, and we need to make sure that departments aren't lowering their standards across this nation because it's, as we see, it's affecting the day-to-day protection of communities.
So, Congressman, you're talking there about lowering the standards of who they hire to become police officers?
Correct. I mean, there have been departments throughout this nation that have lowered standards because they just don't have people knocking on the door to join the ranks. There are departments across this nation, and thankfully there are not tons of them, but there are departments where police officers go to work each and every day to patrol, and they could be sharing a bulletproof vest with other people that serve. I mean, that's no way for us to be having law enforcement act in the United States of America. With all the money that we send across to foreign nations, we need to focus here and make sure that the police officers and law enforcement have the tools in their tool belt to do the job that they were sworn to do.
So, Congressman, I don't think you'll get any argument here that the job of being a police officer in specific districts, specific cities, has never been tougher. You pull up to a call at 11 o'clock at night. No matter the call, there's going to be at least 6 people there with their cell phones going to record what happens. The ocean of guns that are around in certain neighborhoods. But at the end of all that, we do live in a nation where there is a lost legion of young men and boys who are living in combat zones, and they're largely African American, and they have lost all respect, as well as their parents have, for policing, how difficult the job of policing is. What do we do about trying to convince young African Americans and people of color in city after city that the police are there to help, not hurt or hinder?
Well, I think first of all, I think that we've seen that in communities throughout this nation where we've seen new leadership that have embraced the community, the idea of community policing, about being one with the people that you serve. But I would have to disagree that there's not every community, every African American or minority community across this nation, are there people there who dislike the police. I worked in Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is probably one of the most violent square miles in New York City. And I will tell you that as we've seen, and when the Democrats in the New York State legislature passed criminal justice reform, they said that the purpose of that was to protect those minority communities. And those communities are the ones that have suffered most, body bag after body bag being removed from communities like that. And they want police on the street. They want to see men and women in uniform on their corners, because there are people, good people that live in those communities who want to go out and get a gallon of milk and not have to be worried about getting struck with a stray bullet.
Congressman, I want to thank you for saying that, because yes, it is true. No one wants or needs good policing more than people who live in neighborhoods that are afflicted by crime. Of course, people want good policing. But I want to go back to your original point about whom police departments are hiring and why that might have changed. Do you have information that was indeed a factor in what happened in Memphis, that these were somehow unqualified people who became police officers, or because I'm not aware of any reporting that suggests that. It rather suggests to me that this unit, this Scorpion unit that they belong to, was given the assignment to essentially occupy a community rather than to police it, and to do so in a too aggressive and really unsafe manner.
No, I don't have specific information that these individual members of law enforcement were hired under any situation where the standards were lowered. Could they have been? Absolutely. What I'm saying is that across this nation, we have seen that young people who would have had a great career in law enforcement no longer, and that's all communities. That's not just African Americans, that's whites, Hispanics, people from all walks of life do not want to be a member of law enforcement because they are concerned that they're going to spend their career through the lens, like you mentioned, of a camera phone. And anything that you say or do is unfortunately held against you and taken in a very wrong direction. This situation was terrible. And like I said when I started, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. They are going to be held accountable, and they should have never walked a beat. They should have never been sworn in, and they should never be able to police ever again.
Congressman Anthony D'Esposito of New York, thanks so much for your time this morning, and thank you for your service to the city of New York. We appreciate it.